Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first breakout session of today's strategy track, our analyst panel looking at AR across the value chain. My name is Greg Payne. I'm a member of the communications team at PTC. Sarah Reynolds, today's host for Victoria Live, will be moderating the full panel today. I'm just stepping in for a brief moment while she catches up here, and I'll kick us off in the conversation today. So joining us today, members of our analyst panel, I'd like to introduce JP Gounder, Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester, Arnold Vogt, Head of Digital CX and IoT at Teknowlogy Group, and Tom Manelli, Group Vice President for Device and Consumer Research at IDC. Now, for today's panel, we're going to take a look at some of the market drivers for AR technology. We're going to look at some of the inhibitors in the market today, and we're also going to look ahead for all the reasons why AR will continue to grow in the market. So to start, we'll bring in our analyst here. And JP, I think I'll go to you first. Why is now the time for AR?
Thank you, Greg. You know, a number of reasons I think that everyone listening will be familiar with. One is the pandemic has catalyzed and accelerated the trend toward augmented reality. You take particularly the problem that folks had where they couldn't send their field service technician somewhere. So there was like an immediate need. You simply couldn't travel. So remote assistance becomes very attractive under those circumstances. Secondly, you're finding a maturation of the technology, but also familiarity. Companies have been experimenting with this for years. And thirdly, the long-term trend, I would say, of having people in the workforce in industrial sector retire. And so we're all looking for ways to scale out and to make it easier for us to actually get work done in an environment where we know that our talent base is shifting.
Yeah, thank you, JP. That certainly resonates and captures some of the themes that we're hitting on throughout Victoria Live today. And before I go to Tom with the follow-up question there, I'm pleased to say Sarah is now joining us. So Tom, maybe I'll toss this question your way and Sarah will sub in and we'll continue the panel from there. You know, as JP just alluded to, some emphasis on frontline workers and the remote workforce as well. But you know, Tom, for you and me, it was probably easier to pick up our laptops and work from home. But as we know, that wasn't the case with all frontline workers. So why do you think AR is compelling for that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, you know, one of the things that we have seen in our research is that a lot of those frontline workers have really not, had the advantage of leveraging technology in a lot of the work that they do. And in fact, a lot of them are still relegated to paper-based processes. And so one of the things that's really interesting about augmented reality and the ability to leverage phones, tablets, and increasingly headsets is to give technology to these frontline workers, giving them an opportunity to kind of catch up with the rest of the world and to do their jobs both more safely and efficiently than they could before.
Awesome. So JP and Tom, first of all, welcome. Thank you for having me. Sorry for the little jump there. It's been great so far to hear, you chat with Greg about the immediate needs for today for, our return to work strategies maybe. So what are some of the longer term drivers, Arnold, that we're beginning to see now that will maybe keep AR adoption growing as we move forward?
One of the big topics I'm seeing really in the long run is really related to the reduction of carbon emissions. And we all know that AR is a very efficient tool for remote collaboration, right? And clients are using this very successfully during the COVID time. However, we see in long term more and more pressure on companies to reduce their carbon footprint, right? And we see this especially in Europe. So many governments are setting really aggressive targets to become carbon neutral very soon. And it's not far away, I believe we will see even a price tag on carbon emissions. So I strongly believe that AR is a very good tool in the long run to help us to reduce carbon emission. And the second topic I see also in the long run is related what JP already mentioned, right? Let's face it, we are an aging population, right? So we have an aging workforce across Europe, and this is a challenge for many companies because more and more experts are going into retirement per year, and they cannot afford really to lose this know-how, this knowledge. So we really need an efficient way for knowledge capturing and sharing from one generation to the next one. And this is a very significant driver also in the long run.
And that makes sense. Tom, one thing you and I have talked about a lot is that, another clear long-term driver for AR is just the need for training or upskilling of our workforces overall. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you see that playing out?
Yeah, to Arnold's point, one of the big challenges for a lot of organizations is they do have, staff that is aging out and retiring, and a big element of that is how do you capture what they know and transfer it to the next generation. And one of the really interesting things about augmented reality is it can not only help capture those processes, but then create new learning environments for new employees or to upskill existing employees. And so what's really great about AR and what we're already seeing in the numbers is that people learn more efficiently, they retain more, and they can hit value to the company much more quickly when they're trained that way. And if you're an organization that's trying to bring in new blood, it's quite compelling to be able to tell recruits that this is how we are going to train you. We are moving from paper-based or teaching settings into these new technologies that are going to make you a valuable employee much sooner.
Yeah, and JP, when we think about that training use case, but certainly other use cases for AR as well, one of the main benefits that comes to mind is that AR can actually put the information that employees need into context in the physical world. What are your thoughts on how maybe this changes our approach to whether it's training or other use cases going forward?
Well, I think in addition to the training that Tom just talked about, it's also about productivity. I mean, we actually have a productivity crisis in some ways. The numbers haven't gone up as much as one might imagine, given the investments in technology that have been made. And part of that is the lack of relevance of the digital information. Whereas here with augmented reality, you're superimposing sort of digital information and schematics and other things directly over the field of view of the task as you're doing it. And this is very powerful and new. And we've seen, it's new, but it's also been proven out, right? We know that workers can work more effectively, more productively, better quality, and fewer do-overs, for example, in addition to getting help remotely.
Absolutely. Tom, switching gears, can you tell us a little bit about maybe some of the challenges that folks face when they're trying to implement AR in their organization, when they've identified that they want to do this and now they want to get started?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big issues is most organizations, even very forward-thinking organizations, don't have a ton of experience with augmented reality. So they've probably got lots of digital files. They've probably are somewhere in their own transition around digital more broadly, but maybe not a lot of experience. And so, you are talking about changing processes, changing access to, different back-end processes, and then potentially bringing in new devices, sometimes leveraging existing devices, but at other times, bringing in new headsets and smart glasses. And there's just not a lot of expertise. And, frankly, there can be some pushback from the boots on the ground if it's not presented correctly. So I think all those things represent challenges. But the thing that we always see is that once this technology sort of gets a foothold inside an organization, the proof points kind of the technology pays for itself. And most of the people that are engaged in using the technology grow to really appreciate it.
Yeah, change management is so important there because you want to, make sure that you're setting your organization up for success to be able to see that value from AR, I'm sure. JP, one of the things Mike talked about earlier was, one of the key questions of AR is, well, what am I going to augment reality with? What does that content look like? Can you maybe tell us a little bit about, in your experience, where people get hung up on content?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different vectors. One of them is the sort of obvious vector of needing to have 3D models, importing, data about particular pieces of equipment or anything like that, where, this is actually a doable thing, right? I mean, we know how to do this, particularly in industrial and manufacturing. But then there's all the content about what exactly am I doing in my job? What are all the different moments that matter? What does my employee journey look like? And how do I map all of the assets to exactly the right moment when someone is looking at and doing the job that they've been tasked with doing? So that is a different kind of problem, because it's about the process. It's about deeply understanding the pain points and problems of a workflow and working with employees to make sure that all of this great augmentation you're getting through AR actually helps them in the moment that they need it.
Absolutely. Arnold, let's bring you into this conversation. What other inhibitors are you seeing in the market for folks who are looking to get started on their AR journeys?
I see two more challenges here, really, and one is specifically related to the European market, and this is data privacy, right? So this is a topic which emerged almost always in discussions with clients, and we have to accept that people have really concerns in using AR, especially in a private environment. When we talk about video cameras using this, and people don't like it to use it really in a private environment, and we have to accept this, right? However, on the other side, we see really that people are quite open to use AR technology in a poor business-related context. So they do not see the big problem for themselves for privacy reasons when they work in a factory environment. So it's a completely different scenario. It's a poor business environment. It's not a private environment. So when they really see the value of AR in this context, that this is really an efficient and helpful tool, and it's not infecting their data privacy. And I see also the second topic beside data privacy is also when I talk about the market of software tools regarding augmented reality, it's the market maturity I'm seeing in this space, right? So I'm doing a radar, a benchmark each year and looking into this market. And what we see over the last years is really that the market was strongly dominated by very small companies, startups, right? So we saw many startups in this space, and the result was we saw many silo, or let's say point solutions for very specific individual AR use cases, focused on instruction, focused on remote experts. And this was over many years really a challenge in the market. However, it is changing currently. So the market is currently really changing, and we see that more and more also of the bigger vendors are joining the market and probably will dominate this market also in the future, but we will see.
Yeah, definitely something we think about here at PTC. We've identified something at 75 use cases across the value chain for AR in your organization, and we're committed to submitting or to supporting our industrial customers, whether they want to deploy one AR use case or they want to deploy or explore all 75. And I think it's so critical to think about, how you're going to scale your AR investment. Let's say it goes really well in that first use case. Do you need to go out to find other vendors? You're going to work with one vendor that's potentially going to tackle multiple use cases in your organization. So, switching gears again here, one thing I loved about chatting with you folks when we were prepping for today's session is, we looked into our crystal ball and we were talking about, what's next for the AR market in general. And I think this is such a fascinating topic. It's something that we love to speculate about. So, Arnold, maybe starting with you, like for the market to continue to mature, as you're saying, and for companies to really meaningfully adopt more than one of these AR use cases, what has to happen, do you think?
So I'm not looking out into the next 5 years. I'm more looking into the next 2 years and what is really driving the next wave of efficiency for the connected worker within the factory, also in the field services space. And this is strongly related to the topic I mentioned earlier. We see a lot of silo solutions currently. And the next big wave regarding efficiency, I really expect will come through the integration of these different solutions, silos we are currently seeing. And we have to see it from the perspective of unconnected worker. It's all about user experience, right? And the next point regarding efficiency is really to give them an integrated experience. And let me give you an example how this could look like. So, for example, when you have a factory worker and he's getting via an AR tool instructions how he can assemble a product, right? So this is really the first step. But it should be directly integrated in the next step that he get a quality check, right?
Yeah.
So is everything right what he's doing, so he can consistently follow, okay, everything is okay, and I can go on with my work, right? So this is an important second step, which should be directly integrated. Another step, which is also very important from my perspective, is the documentation. When everything is going right, okay, you should document that the product is well produced, and you should document this. And this is also an important step in the overall process. If something is going wrong, right? So the connected worker should have immediate access to a knowledge base to search for more information, how to fix the problem. If this is not possible, he should be able to get immediate access to a remote expert to ask for support. And when you think about even more and more complex production lines, it's maybe not only one remote expert, right? Maybe you need a team of experts to talk to them and to fix the problem, which is sometimes between different machines, right? So, and this is also a very important topic to integrate this directly. But when also this happens, you should also integrate directly the next step, which says, okay, we fixed a new problem here. We should document this, right? So again, the point of knowledge sharing should be directly integrated. So it's really a complete workflow for the connected worker, an integrated user experience for his whole working shift.
Yeah, so important to make sure that they're connected to all of the resources they need, whether they're within augmented reality, or maybe it's just connecting them with the experts that they need through augmented reality, presenting that information in a single user experience that makes it really easy for them to get what they need. I totally see that. Tom, when we think about all these use cases for AR, obviously, there's a lot of talk about AR devices, the digital eyewear, maybe, or the digital eyewear enhancements that are coming to the market. But I think there's also a benefit, and you would probably agree with this, that, maybe there's not always a need for digital eyewear in every organization or for every use case. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. In fact, I think, my own thinking has evolved around this. A couple of years ago, if you had asked me, the ultimate end game for AR would be everybody in a headset who needs one, right? And the thing that I've come to realize is that it's really about driving processes and increasing training and making employees more efficient and safe. And sometimes that can happen using a phone. Sometimes that can happen using a tablet. In some instances, it will require a headset. But it's not really a one size fits all. And in fact, even inside the headset market, you can have monocular headsets that are sort of providing assisted reality versus augmenting reality and dropping digital objects into your field of view. So I think one of the things that companies need to be very aware of as they, go through this journey is that ultimately every employee doesn't have to have a headset. And in fact, some employees will be best served by just using the phone or tablet that they may already have deployed.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Obviously, there's critical benefits to be had by using some of these headsets. Hands-free work, for example, presenting the information to employees without needing to occupy one of their hands with a phone or tablet. But I think we've all seen use cases where a phone or tablet is going to be the right modality to use for employees, and certainly it might be one they already have. So as you look to get started with AR, I think it's really important to figure out, are you looking to use a bring your own device strategy with your employees? Are you looking to ship employees, phones or tablets that they might use in other parts of their work, as well as with the AR instructions you want to provide to them? Or is digital eyewear, really the best path forward for your organization? I think that's really interesting. JP, let's talk about like AR and AI. AI is a great buzzword. We love using it. You hear a lot about AI today in Beforia Live, but I think combining the best parts of AR and AI seems like an obvious step forward for the market. What do you see that dynamic looking like?
Yeah, I mean, clearly as you said, you're already using lots of computer vision and other technologies, object recognition. AI is already a part of AR, but it's going to be more so over time. And I think building on something that Arnold said is when you look at it from the employee journey perspective, as that person walks through their daily job, AI is going to infuse more and more moments that matter. It's going to take all of the information from, let's say, sensors, IoT, and sort of the instrumented environment and tell that person, what's the next best thing I can do? And give me more and more proactive input. So there's a layer of intelligence. But even farther out in the future, what I see is something even more powerful, which is we do a lot of remote access where we have one expert on one end and we have a recipient who's doing work on the other end. Ultimately, that's not terribly scalable because you still need two people. You need this one-on-one connection. So what if we could use AI to take the place of the expert altogether? Now, I'm not expecting to see this in 2 years or maybe even 5, but in 10 years, we should be looking for full replacement of the expert to help people to do their job, to detect what they're doing. And we have elements of this already we can see. So the AI knows what you're doing and can say, okay, keep on that path. No, you've made a mistake, go back. That sort of thing is going to be powerful. It's going to be scalable, and it's going to add to that intelligence layer that really controls how we use AR.
Yeah, that's a really cool insight. And I think you're going to see some of that action recognition capability, not to give you a sneak peek into our sneak peek later, but that's definitely something we're thinking about here at Beforia. We definitely see the opportunities that presents. Tom, infusing AI into all of these processes could really probably help to eliminate some of the human biases in what's even considered to be a best practice in our organization, right?
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think if we think about the next couple of years and maybe the time between now and the future that JP articulated, I think part of what we will see companies using AI to do is to suss out what are the best practices. So in any organization, in a multinational with people, all around the world, it's more often than not the people who are making these decisions are going to lean towards, well, the way we do it is the best, right? But once you start capturing these processes in AR and then running them through AI, you can run the numbers. Who is the most efficient? Who is the safest? Who's completing the job the fastest? So I think those are some of the elements where we will see AI and AR enhancing how the human element of all these processes goes forward.
Yeah, I think that's great. Folks, we have some time here today where we're going to be looking at our moderated Q&A, right? We have the opportunity to ask the analysts any and all questions that you might have for them, right? So please send us your questions. We do have a couple coming in already. We're talking a lot about use cases today and all different kinds of use cases for AR. And it's something that we're talking about across Beforia Live, right? One person asked, analysts, what are maybe the use cases that you're seeing the most success with? We hit on training earlier a little bit. We hit on a couple of the other use cases. Maybe JP, starting with you, like when you look out to the 75 use cases around the value chain, like where do you see companies starting on their AR journey?
Yeah, I mean, look, remote assistance of various sorts is a starting point for so many. And then the ability to sort of augment that so that it's not just a video call, right? That you're actually able to do some real-time drawing on the screen, if you will, so that the person who's receiving that has that insight. Certainly training, onboarding, but then also, as I said, step-by-step instruction, in-the-moment assistance, checklisting, compliance, which is something that was talked about a little earlier. And then more emerging would be, using it to visualize product design, being able to actually take that environment of augmented reality and collaborate together on particular projects. So all of those things are happening. And as you said, there's at least 75 or more, but those are some of the most in demand today among the companies that I talk to, with the understanding that in every sub-vertical of industry, there are particular problems that necessitate more. And the last one I'll just say is the expert capture concept itself is just really, really powerful. I mean, I think people are not only looking to digitize and augment those processes, but they need a way to actually figure out how to capture the information in the first place and the insight.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight. And for folks who aren't familiar with Euphoria Expert Capture, which JP mentioned, that's a tool that allows you to really capture the tacit domain knowledge of your tenured experts in your organization, those folks who maybe are aging out before they leave your organization, really capture their workflows, their step-by-step instructions, their best practices as they work. I think it's a really powerful concept. And certainly if you're interested in learning more, we are hosting a work instructions focused session later on with Ryan from the Euphoria product team. Maybe this question is for you, Tom. Someone asked, are there any tips for encouraging buy-in from those folks who are, boots on the ground, or those folks who are technicians out in the field, especially for maybe folks who are set in their ways, or maybe folks who are in that tenured employee population who are less comfortable with technology?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think any instance where you can explain to someone how it's going to make their job a little bit easier, maybe a little bit safer, maybe a little bit less long days, right? If you can cut time down on a truck roll, for example, because that person can access the digital information they need on the spot, or if they are reaching out to an expert who can help them solve a problem that they are stuck on. So I think a lot of it just really has to do with show, don't tell. Let people understand and experience the technology. And then frankly, it is about putting the right tools in their hands. So the right software and the right hardware. You don't necessarily need to put someone into a full AR experience if they're going to be going up a power pole, right? And so understanding what they're concerned about and how you are helping them, I think, are some of the big tips.
I think that's great. That's a really good insight, especially as we look to, maybe capture that tacit domain knowledge, as we said, or make people more comfortable with digital eyewear or some of these other modalities for AR. I mean, AR is new and exciting. It's something we get so pumped up about, but sometimes we maybe forget to center people in our change management processes. We're thinking about devices. We're thinking about, the needs of our content engine. We're thinking about, okay, how do I actually take 3D CAD data and import it into, before we instruct to make work instructions, right? We're thinking about the technical, but we really need to focus on the people. Arnold, we had a couple of questions, specific to the markets that you look at. You mentioned the data privacy concerns that you're seeing in the European market. Are there other trends in the European market or the way that your European customers focus on adopting AR that are maybe a little bit different to what we would see as we look out to the US market or maybe the broader market around the globe?
So one topic which is really interesting for, let's say, the innovators we see here in Europe, they are also looking into the context of spatial computing, right? Which is also one of the topics you are looking into it. It's maybe not a short-term opportunity, but over the coming years, I really expect that we will see more and more use cases related to this technology. Maybe the first one which will appear is regarding indoor tracking of people, right? So that help people to navigate through complex buildings, maybe also around complex machineries to find the right place. So this is also a very attractive and interesting solution. And I see that innovative companies across Europe are interested to understand, okay, how can we leverage these kind of capabilities and solutions? And especially in Europe, it's Europe and Germany, we have a lot of big automotive companies, so they are really interested in these very innovative solutions.
Yeah, that makes sense. Looks like we have time maybe for one additional question here from the audience, and I'm just navigating through all of our different windows here. Thank you so much, team, for submitting all of your questions in the chat. It's super interesting to see how you are all thinking about AR adoption. Maybe JP, we had a lot of questions about sort of this crystal ball, like future of work approach. When you think about even the longer term plan, we focus maybe on like the 2 to 3 year crystal ball earlier. Like you think about 5, 10 years down the road. I know you focus on the future of work. What are some of the trends that maybe will impact how we think about AR in that longer term crystal ball?
I think companies are going to be developing quite a lot of digital assets that are AR first, that are going to be things like holograms, things like instruction sets, schematics that are going to be quite proprietary to their company. And it means that when someone from a utility company shows up at your house, there may be a hologram sitting there waiting for them to tap into all of the service history, understand everything that's gone on, maybe even get a sense of the compliance done by the previous person who came to do the work. Or in a manufacturing plant, you're going to find that the level of instruction and auditing is going to be extremely high. So you're going to see a drive toward quality because everyone will know what happened before. And as I said, the AI component here will help with that. And Tom referenced using machine learning to capture what is the best practice? How can we coach people to be better? So a lot of this comes down to not just the futurism and the fancy stuff, but really mapping these technologies to the business problems moment by moment, task by task that workers are doing in a factory, in the field, that is going to help them to become better. Hopefully, with more digital first, digital native kind of folks coming up, we're going to see a huge fusion of how people think about their job alongside artificial intelligence tools.
Awesome. And I can't wait to see that progression happen over time. It's such an interesting field to work in, certainly such an interesting field to study, as you folks well know. I know we're right at time here. I really appreciate the discussion today, JP, Tom, Arnold. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for playing switcheroo there at the beginning. Thank you, of course, to Greg Payne, who was helping me pinch it. And thank you, audience, for all of your questions and your chat insights. If we didn't get a chance to answer your question today, we'll certainly make sure to connect with you offline. And we hope you have a great day here at Vuforia Live. I'm sure I'll see you all later. But thank you, team, for being here.